Towards the end of 2020, I started a personal blender school of sorts composed of YouTube playlists on topics I wanted to improve in. This was at a time I was already doing similar exercises with CG Matter and Chris Brenninger's Node and Animation Node tutorial series. This also included learning hard-ups and box cutter through the videos of Ponty, Josh, and Master Xeon. I think I prematurely pursued making my first acid pack Hexies before really absorbing enough material and experience using the tools, and that fed a frustration with what I was making, and I temporarily abandoned the project, having decided or realized I didn't have a good foundation. When Aramis started his Polygon homework series, I took it as a sign to venture into that, especially when he covered the works of Vitaly Bulgarov. The idea was for me to finally address that underlying hunger I think fueled my drive to pursue a career in 3D in the first place, particularly the sub-D style. So I decided to switch over to this Polygon homework series after much delay, and like with any new venture, it had a rocky start, and the results were... I pushed through that dissatisfaction, having resolved that I should focus on building consistency with the practice, and I had no excuse since I was now doing something I wanted to do for a long time. It was meant to be an indefinite addition to the routine, but that, on top of nodes and box cutter and hard-ups, left nothing left of the day or night for much else, and I needed to really focus on the real-world side of life. 30 days was a nice cap and made it a neat package I could look back on when I needed motivation for the next thing when doubts crept in. First few days were a mixed bag in that they didn't feel like something I was driving. It was simply applying what was mentioned in the homework videos. There were, however, two standout projects that felt like something was starting to click. These were Day 4 and Day 6. Day 4 was the first project that mildly resembled something, in this case, a funky engine. Day 6 took things a step further because it showed that multiple objects could be abstracted from the same mass. A mask or breastplate, the midsection of the same armor, to what looks like an egg, all of this from the same session. It was at this point that I started to see the possibilities that would open up creatively, and this helped to reinforce the notion that this was a good idea. Bear in mind that I had not planned to make anything specific, as this felt like an unnecessary limitation and the point was to get loose with it. As the days went on, I think I started to settle too much into a routine of the same moves, and this led to a lot of pieces, although having started and traveled differently, ultimately ending up looking the same. Day 9 and 10 are clear examples of this, and I later realized this was also due to little mistakes like not knowing when to apply modifiers that were causing clipping and making it difficult to continue down certain paths. I had a completely different idea of what Day 10 would end up like, and this is obvious when you watch the video. By Day 13 I started having inklings of what I wanted to make beforehand, but still not committing to the final look, only running with the general idea. Up until the midway point, I was content with how things were going, and the challenge had enough of its own steam to continue on. But Day 16 for me was a turning point. A few things happened on this particular day. There was a slight breakaway from the existing lessons. I started to apply principles like counterpoints and contrasting, so this meant that as segments were pulled, they would taper as if they were real material being molded. I added sawn-off bits to make it look like it was a metallic piece that had been painted over. It was also a color I found I really liked a lot. I'd continue along similar lines with this type of style, but not wanting to stagnate again, opted to mix things up and try making something deliberately. This took the form of the iron lungs. Fighting the tendency to settle became a theme at this point, so I jumped back into the freestyling method, keeping some elements I like. I could tell that a personal style was developing. Wanting to explore that a bit more, I allowed myself some level of repetition if it meant I could find a new variation that I might like. It worked on some days, it failed on others. I will admit there were days when I couldn't wait for the challenge to be done with, but I also had to admit to myself at the time that I was subjectively better off than I was at the start, and that snapped me back into the game. I don't want to repeat a lot of what's been covered in the description boxes of each video, but if you're interested in some more insight into what was happening with each piece, choose a video, scroll down and have a look. I can without a doubt say that this challenge was a personal success and victory. I managed to accomplish most, if not all, the goals that I set out with. But I also discovered some that I had not anticipated before starting. Granted, the pieces I made were more sculptural than functional, but functionality wasn't at the top of the list. It was more about fostering consistency in practice, shaking off the anxiety that often creeps in before any project, as well as completing an assignment without obsessing about the final picture. There was definitely more behind the scenes as the days went on that didn't make it into the videos or mentioned in the community posts. A big chunk of this was the self-imposed expectation to produce something better than the last piece, which I think was the main reason for a lot of the latter days starting off with many abandoned pieces. Frustration became a part of the process again, as well as the main villain of the day. Having accepted that this was becoming a staple of the process, I decided to lean into it and incorporate it into the session. This meant that I knew that I may spend an hour or two making pieces I would probably dismiss. Purposely factoring this in diffused the negative charge of the emotion, and the days improved. They didn't get better or easier, but the outcome made getting past those hurdles just another little task versus a possible derailment altogether. That last bit for me is probably one of the big wins for this project as a whole. I know it's a sappy thing to say, but it ended up being what I think I needed more than just to make better mech forms. I was able to discover that where I thought I was at level 0, looking to progress to level 1 or 2, I was still very much at level -5, moving toward level 0, and I now have something to show for that. Without a shadow of a doubt, I would strongly recommend anyone else who's been struggling in ability, confidence, and even more likely procrastination to try something similar to this. Subject matter can be whatever you like as long as you commit to it. Shake things up when you get comfortable. Suppress some expectations when you feel like they're good enough reasons not to try, and just do something. You may not be able to predict what the final outcome will look like, but it's observing the changes in the process that ends up being the most fun. Journey before destination.